so good to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Rotherham, and welcome to another edition of the Coaching Hour. Fear not, it is not 60 minutes. It's bite-sized, although today's guest is someone who I really would like to have in more than a bite-sized fashion. I'll leave you guessing who that is, although maybe you can see his face on your screen right now if you're watching this. It's lovely to have the regular ladies here as well from Coaches Network South Africa, Mareka and Mary. Hello, ladies.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Good to have you here. And if you're wondering who we are and what we do, well, it's all about exposing you to the incredible world that is coaching and to the amazing people who are in that world. We have some really diverse and interesting topics, and we're really looking forward to sharing some of that content with you today in the form of one of my favorite speakers. He's joined us on numerous occasions, and it gives us great pleasure to welcome once again Siapie Karel Piet van Eeden. Hello, doctor.
Good morning.
It's great
to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul, for that great introduction. Yes, we have Dr. Siapie van Eeden again, and we just love to talk to you, Siapie. Just to introduce you properly, he's the founder of ADHD Help, and he's also an integrative medicine practitioner. And today we're going to speak about something that's quite a buzzword, and that's biohacking. We're going to talk about practical biohacking through genetics, which is going to be a very interesting discussion. So thank you so much for joining us again today. Before we start, Siapie, biohacking, what's that?
Biohacking is such a buzzword these days. We were chatting about that earlier, that it's easy to throw it around and say, I'm biohacking, or I want to study biohacking, but people don't always understand what it is. So my definition is taking practical steps of changing the way that the body expresses itself and the body responds to things. So it's optimization of the body through certain interventions. And so it's a very wide field of things you can do. You get these extremely fancy, expensive toys. I love them, but we can also do biohacking on a very practical basis. And that is what I think we could chat about today.
Okay, good. And you mentioned through genetics. Now, isn't our genes something that we are born with and that is set in stone?
It is. So genetics is a fascinating field of study. You get half your genes from mom and half from dad in your normal cell. Funny enough, if you now go a bit deeper and you look at your mitochondria, you only get your mitochondrial genes from your mother. But if we look at these genes, it's little rows of numbers, and they don't really make sense when we have these genetic tests done until somebody then gets to interpret them for you. Now, you said, yes, they are set in stone. Genes are set in stone, but the expression of the gene, you can change sometimes through your lifestyle and through nutraceuticals or just dietary change. Now, there are many different groupings of genes. You get what you call your high penetrance genes. A high penetrance gene, you cannot change the expression. So that would be your eye color, for example. We cannot genetically change our eye color unless we now go for operation, but that's a synthetic change. It doesn't genetically change the color of the eye. There are certain disease states, the BRCA gene. If you have a specific BRCA gene combination, your chances of breast cancer as a female are raised, and you cannot necessarily change that. Now, I have to be very honest, I don't want to know those things. If I can't change the genetic expression, then if I know I have a predisposition for cancer, what happens? I live in fear. Fear brings down the immune system so that the disease can come quicker. So I'm not a fan. It's a beautiful study, but for me, for average knowledge, I don't necessarily want to know my high penetrance genes. Low penetrance genes, of course, then on the other hand, would be, and we'll go into some examples, but your ApoE gene, if you have a specific ApoE, E3, E4, E4 combination, which means you got an E4 gene from mom and an E4 gene from dad, it means that your risk of Alzheimer's is raised considerably, unless you cut out alcohol.
Oh,
Then you
fascinating.
mitigate the expression of the gene. And this is where we work. And this is the beautiful study then of nutrigenomics. And that is biohacking on a genetic level then, or one of the forms of biohacking on genetic level. How do I, through my lifestyle, through my diet, through supplementation, mitigate or switch on some genes? Because not all genes are negative. You get protective genes as well. So it is this balance that we then want to play with.
If I understand correctly, Sepia, you do a gene test as well. If you can maybe enlighten us on what that would entail, or what could that help one with to then take the right steps to mitigate, whatever risks there might be.
Yes, most definitely. So you guys know I love this country. That's why I'm still here and haven't immigrated yet. And one thing that makes me very proud is that there's a lab in South Africa that has opened branches in America on a genetic or as a genetic lab. That is how good they are with their interpretations and how they give you your test results. Now, taking a genetic sample is very easy. With the lab that we use, I use a couple of labs, but the specific test would be they courier you a test kit. First thing in the morning when you wake up, you take a buccal swab, so a minute on this side, a minute on that side, package it, courier comes and fetches it, and a month later you have your genetic report. So it's that simple. It's beautiful to work with that. And then they give you infographics, the specific lab. So what they've done is they say that anybody can do a genetic test. So running those little numbers, that's not rocket science anymore. But what they do is they then look at the combinations of specific proven genetic tests and say that because you have this combination of results, your risk of inflammation is very high. Unless you then do these following things. And this becomes something practical. I did my gene test, so I used myself as an example. Oftentimes, when I got my results, I saw that my inflammation risk is very high. My oxidative stress risk is very high, so there's a lot of oxidation, bad junk being created in my body. Plus, my body doesn't get rid of estrogen metabolites easily in my liver. Now, that combination puts you at risk for hormonal cancer. And I've had breast cancer twice because my liver cannot get rid of the estrogen that's in our drinking water, that's in our environment quickly enough. Now I know that. So I take medication to stop that. But on a practical level, I eat a lot of broccoli and cruciferous veg, because that helps that blocking of the estrogen. So for me, and that's why I have a big passion for this, is you can see your risk and then you can mitigate that. And if you like broccoli like me, it's not that bad a thing. It's just now I have an excuse to eat it more often.
Would you say, Sepia, that it was through the testing that you had that you learned that this was an issue within your body, which has now resulted in you eating the broccoli? So that was the process. Obviously, we don't have to go through that process. We can just choose to be healthy, full stop. So I could choose to eat broccoli and cauliflower and vegetables, choose not to drink tap water, choose not to consume alcohol. So there are many things that we could do, I'm guessing, without even knowing what our genes are.
Most definitely. So most of these things are almost common sense, healthy ways of living. When we, though, look into things like the ApoE gene that raises your risk for memory problems and Alzheimer's, and cutting out alcohol, that is not such a straightforward thing. So one thing that I love, and the page that I use most as a herbalist, is of course the nutrients that they give you. And that is a very practical thing. So they can tell you, for example, your B12 impact is very high. So they always look at the possible impact it can have on your life. If B12 impact is very high, it means that you can consume the same amount of B12 through supplementation and food as other people, but your body struggles to absorb it. So you need to get the same levels of B12 in your body. You need to consume more of that. And then there's that whole cascade of influences of B12. Same with vitamin D. It can tell us if you are genetically predisposed to lower levels of vitamin D, so that you can then up your supplementation. One thing that I found fascinating also is in caffeine, people's response to caffeine. So it tells you how quickly you metabolize it. And on a practical level, if you are a fast metabolizer of caffeine and you go and run the comrades, you know that you have your first energy dip at 3 hours. A fast metabolizer of caffeine will drink their caffeine shot as that dip happens, and they will get their energy. The slow metabolizer will have to drink the caffeine shot at the beginning of the race, because it will only start kicking in after 3 hours. So, and that is where we know that caffeine will give us energy, but when is the best way of taking it? And that's, again, more the optimization that we then talk about when it comes to the biohacking in genetics.
So there's definitely value in understanding your genetics, because we can have an idea, okay, this type of cancer or illness is prevalent in my family, I should avoid certain things. But there's so much that we would not know. And I think there's lots of value in knowing. And the test that you are referring to, is it more practical in that sense because it's a different type of test than what we might have heard before?
Yes. So there are many genetic centers out there these days, and ones that trace your ancestry, and it's beautiful for tracing ancestry. This is very different. So this was developed with the eye on nutrigenomics, which is then how do I use my lifestyle and food plus supplementation to mitigate risk.
Yes.
So same but different approach.
And can you quickly showed us earlier? Yeah, we can have a look and see, what is it called?
Sure. It's called the 3x4 genetics test.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a look, they do beautiful, beautiful infographics. Yes. And so your pictures change according to your results. Nice. So when we work with people, it's easy to show them. You know, I'm on the energy page, which works with your metabolism. There are people who we call them gluttons, who never feel full. It could be on a genetic level that the brain doesn't send out the message that you have had enough. And yet we blame them. So that's one side. The other side also then works on how does your body burn fat while you are exercising? What is your exercise response? So if you have a very high exercise response, it means that, sorry for you, you have to be in the gym consistently in order to maintain a healthy weight. It's not that you can train once a week like other people do and look well. Then there's a new thing that they are doing in the States with sports teams. So the whole sports team will do their genetics, and they will have to then wear a Fitbit. And part of this genetic test will tell you your training response, your risk of injury, which types of tests or of exercises are better for you, endurance versus power, and how much recovery time do you have or do you need. So the manager of the team will compare the genetic results with the information on the Fitbit and say to them, okay, well, this guy has trained 3 times this week. His risk of injury is higher than others. He's not allowed to take part in the next game.
Interesting.
And so that's more on a professional level when it comes to your genetic and biohacking on that.
It makes sense that one needs to, yeah, yes, Mary?
You didn't mention thoughts. Does thoughts influence your genetic,
Yes.
code?
Yes, so we're going into the world of Bruce Lipton now. Yes, you can. And again, it doesn't change the gene. It changes the expression of the gene. So I truly believe that, yes, the way that we talk to our bodies can have an influence on the expression of these genes, yes.
And if I understand correct, is it the thoughts that changes the expression, or is it the emotions and the hormones and so on that's, because of the thoughts triggering anxiety or triggering fear, which is the emotion, which changes this, I don't know if it affects in the structure of our cells. Just to quickly go into that.
For me, it is a combination of them, because it's like a river. You need the one for the other one to follow. So the easiest one to start hacking into would be the thought that changes the emotion, which then has the effect on the gene. Yes. We are taught when we do the training in genetics to always look upstream. Don't look at the problem. Look at upstream. What is the cause of the challenge? And so for me, it's easier to look at the thought and change the thought consciously than trying to force an emotion that will change the genetic expression.
Yeah, so
How
your
does
first...
the thought change? Sorry. How does the thought... I mean, can you tell us what the process is? I mean, so if you're thinking something, what happens then in the body?
So thoughts would
Chemically,
trigger chemically. So, so when I have a thought, it's linked to a memory. That's the way that we are programmed. So the thought elicits a state. And this is now where we bring neuro-linguistic programming into genetics. So it's beautiful. So the thought triggers a state. The state then releases certain hormones as well as neurotransmitters, and that then has the cascade effect into the body. So my pituitary gland then does something to the thyroid. Thyroid says, I don't like this, so let me clamp up, and then the rest happens. Or I have a thought and it releases adrenaline because it's a fear-based thought, and now I have this lion roaring in my face, and that causes a stress response, which then has an effect on the genetic expression again. Now, it's beautiful to just say these words, but it's not practical for me. So I promised we'll be practical today. So let's think about procrastination. I procrastinate because I need adrenaline in order to function, because I'm tired, I'm burnt out. So now I have a report that's due and it's late. So now suddenly I stress, I release adrenaline. So my cortisol levels go up. If I have a predisposition for hormonal imbalances, and now my cortisol affects my hormones, it means that I can then go into burnout even quicker and wake up between 2 and 3 in the mornings, and then have a bad night's rest or sleep, wake up the next morning groggy, what means I have to drink more caffeine. And so the knock-on effect of that procrastination, because I need the energy, then just becomes more and more pronounced, and one day I crash. So it's the recognition of that and saying, okay, how can I energize my body? What does my body need? Maybe I have a challenge with B vitamins. If I up my B vitamins, I don't need to procrastinate. Then I can work on the learned behavior and then live a healthier and happier life.
This is almost, Siapia, like a little blueprint for each of us. Almost like a a guide of what to do, what not to do. And I'm assuming this goes into all aspects, our diet, our sleep, our exercise, our recovery, our susceptibility to illness and disease. So it literally gives us like almost a little handbook for saying, okay, these are the things I should avoid. These are perhaps the foods that I should stay away from. These are the foods I should be having more of, and so on.
Yes. So now you use the word blueprint. It's actually printed on the first page or on the cover page of the report. They call it your genetic blueprint.
Okay.
And so it's a manual for the body.
And does that test give you the practical things that you need to do then to mitigate, like eat more of this, eat more less of that, exercise, this format? Does it give you all of those suggestions?
It does. So the two ways of doing the test, you can order it online, of course, and you can just get your results. It was initially created for people to consult with. Yes. So you can have once you do the test, you have the baseline and basic information, but then you can go and see a nutritionist or a dietitian. It was initially done for dietitians to help work out what people need on that level. So then we can go and take a deep dive into the genetics. So for us to script these tests, we needed to do specific training in order to learn how to interpret on a deeper level and then come up with practical solutions.
Yes, I like the practical approach to this, that it's not that, I might have this condition, let me take this handful of pills. It's how can you adapt your lifestyle? And I love that idea. So for us to leave people with a final thought, and also where can people do that test, or can they contact you and do it via your practice? How can people go about?
Yeah, with pleasure. They're more than welcome to make an appointment through adhdhelp.co.za. They can just let us know that they want to do the genetic test and not necessarily come and see us for the brain optimization. And yeah, we can run it from there. And just a final thought on it. I mean, more knowledge means more power.
Yes.
And more choice.
Yeah, you won't know if you don't know what your genes might or might not express. So I think it was very, very valuable. Thank you, Sepia. Very insightful. I will definitely at some stage do my DNA blueprint so I can see what I don't know.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sepia. Always insightful. We love having you on this show. We'll look forward to hearing from you again, I'm sure. And such wonderful insights and interesting information today. Thank you for sharing.
Cool. Thank you. My absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Sepia. You always give us such a wealth of knowledge. You have to listen a few times to get the meaning.
I'm sorry. I tried to make it. I tried to make it simple, but genetics are not simple by definition.
True.
Well, you make it very easy for us to understand. So you do a good job of putting it into layman's terms, Sepia. So thank you for that.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
And that's where we leave you for this edition of the Coaching Hour. To Sepia, Mary, and Mareka, and from myself, Paul. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time and company, and we'll look forward to your company in the next one. Bye for now.